Let's talk to Amy Fisher, though, former Special Advisor to Home Secretary Amber Rudd and former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. Amy, very good morning to you.
Hiya.
So, Rishi Sunak is going to set out his stall today. Is this his kind of... he's taking a bit of a long run at it if he's not doing anything until the autumn, isn't he?
Well, look, I sort of get the strategy. There was quite good news, rare good news for the government last week with the fact that we had better than expected GDP figures. We're better out of that technical recession that we had towards the end of last year. And he's sort of hoping to sweep away those disastrous local election results that sort of came after about 10 days or so.
Yeah.
So with this speech, he seems to be doubling down on another subject area, which is traditionally quite a strong one for the Conservatives in terms of defence of the realm, security. Now, that also sounds fine as a sort of grand thematic set-piece strategy, but as you've alluded to, it's not without its dangers. The first one is, in fact, I would argue, presentational. You know, Rishi Sunak himself is not necessarily the most charismatic of politicians. You know, he doesn't have that kind of great chutzpah that's perhaps Boris Johnson. Whether you liked him or not, he could command an audience. And secondarily, as you've also alluded to, the subjects that he's talking about, all of these threats from the sort of new Axis foreign powers, Russia, China, North Korea, the threat from AI. I mean, this is all sort of very terrifying stuff. So, you know, the proof will be in the pudding. What are the policies that he might be announcing later that kind of reassure people that the Conservative government is the best one to protect people against these policies of the future? Not least because, as if we remember and go back to the Brexit campaign, you know, negative campaigning tends not to be something people are particularly drawn to.
No, exactly right. And one of the phrases that's being used at the moment is that Britons will see almost every aspect of their lives changing. It feels sort of irrevocable, doesn't it? It feels as though it's already
overwhelming. This is what I mean. It's terrifying. It's overwhelming. You know, even leaving aside, you know, the sort of traditional geopolitics, the military threat from, as I say, North Korea, China, Russia. You know, if Rishi is launching, if the Prime Minister is then launching into his exposition of what the challenges of AI are. I mean, I think people do find that, you know, very, very frightening, not just in terms of perhaps how it will affect them, you know, will their jobs be lost? To then, you know, we're talking about some terrifying, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the rise of Terminator, you know, robots taking over the world.
Right.
Now, look, and Rishi himself comes from a tech background, you know, and this government is always very keen to talk about the benefits of tech. You know, the tech sector is worth about 1 trillion to the UK economy. You know, that's all very good in terms of investment, R&D, potential jobs and all the rest of it. But I don't think it does address this really existential fear of what does this mean if you're talking about the landscape changing in such a short time, 5 years, that's nothing. So as I say, whilst laying out these big strategic thematic challenges, one hopes there's going to be some real sort of meat and backbone policy to what the government is going to do to equip us all for what sounds like a really scary future at the moment.
Well, exactly. And also, having been in power, whether he believes it or not in his own mind, Rishi Sunak, you know, the Tories have been in power for 14 years, so that's the way the public sees it. You know, they've got to a point with them where they say, well, hang on, you telling us you didn't know that Russia was going to become a problem, or that China was going to become a problem, or that, you know, the Middle East might be a bit of a powder keg, or that AI wasn't coming. I mean, you know, you're supposed to be the government. You're supposed to see these things coming, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, 14 years is a long time for anything, let alone a government. So I certainly think that's a fair criticism. Not least if we look, you know, a really big sort of fly in the ointment is the current Foreign Secretary David Cameron. You know, was the person, along with the then Chancellor George Osborne back in the day, who really was promoting China and closer relationships. And now, sort of a decade on, that didn't necessarily look like, you know, the smartest of things to do. However, you know, what the government does always have in its pocket, whether it's talking about being equipped to face these geopolitical challenges, be it talking about the safest pair of hands with the economy, you know, people do tend to stay with the status quo. You know, surely the better the devil you know than the one you don't. Obviously, you know, the government will keep pushing back to the fact that Labour have not matched the Conservatives' commitment. So the latest Conservative commitment to spending £7 billion more on defence by 2030, you know, Keir Starmer's response to that has arguably been a little bit wishy-washy. But you're right, there are very legitimate questions about why the government is choosing now at this point to sort of fire some kind of starting gun, no puns intended, on the sort of long general election campaign by throwing all these things up, which, as I say, seem kind of broadly terrifying and a bit scary, and not necessarily how anybody wanted to wake up this Monday morning.
And most people, I think, certainly people that I talk to on this show and outside of here as well, care about things like the NHS, care about, getting to see a doctor, care about the number of migrants who are being allowed in both legally and illegally, care about the cost of living, care about the price of food, care about how much they're paying for their energy. All of those things were far more important than some kind of overarching, seemingly, nebulous, unattainable goal of making the world a nicer place.
Yeah, well, this is what I don't quite understand. As I say, having had the good news last week about, higher than expected GDP, I don't understand why they aren't sort of doubling down more on the economic record, because, say what you like, inflation has been halved. There are 4 million more people now in employment than in 2010. This government has raised personal income tax thresholds. They've raised the national living wage just since April last month to £11.44. I mean, I'm not saying people have it easy. I'm not saying people aren't still having a hard time with their, sort of food inflation and gas bills and all the rest of it. However, there are material things that this government can point to, certainly on their economic record, as being, good things. They are still trying on that front to take the fight to Labour. It was very noticeable in some of the Conservative Party social media output last week that they are pointing back to this month, it having been 25 years since Gordon Brown sold off the gold.
Yeah.
Again, that was a real thing that sort of happened. You can say it was 25 years ago, but that's still a material thing to point to. So yeah, I just don't understand why they didn't take this opportunity this week to still continue talking about, some of the good news that there's been on the economy, as opposed to launching, again, no puns intended, this whole other front on these, esoteric, in terms of people's everyday lives, something that they probably prefer, understandably, not to have to worry about.
Yeah. Well, that's it. But the other factor, which I'm sure you know more better than most, is, we saw it in 97. People were fed up with the Tories. We got Labour. Saw it in 2010. People were fed up with Labour. We got the Tories back. Now it seems that there is a kind of irrevocable nature to the fact that, this is the end for the Tory party for the moment, no matter what they do.
So look, I'm not going to sit here and say everything is rosy in the garden of Conservatives.
Well, nothing's
because that
rosy
would
in the garden, is it? Really?
That would be I mean, ridiculous thing to say. However, I don't think it is irrevocably lost. The Conservatives have done something on the economic record, as I just pointed out, and I'm sure over the coming months they'll be keen to point to other things that they have done over the last 14 years that we may not always remember. For example, passing of the same-sex marriage. There are things the Conservative government has done that you can point to, and let's can we be honest on the other side? I mean, Keir Starmer's Labour is a bit of a motley lot at the moment.
Oh, it is.
We
had
a
totally.
Last week with Natalie Elphick, who by anyone's estimation was on the right of the Conservative Party. Now she's apparently found her home in, Labour, and certainly that's caused some ructions in their ranks. And also, what are some of Labour policies? They haven't met the commitment on defence spending. It's not clear what their plan on small boats would be. Certainly the NHS, which you just mentioned a while ago. Okay, it's not good news for the Conservatives at the moment with massive waiting lists and all the rest of it. But even Wes Streeting, Labour's health minister, has said, pouring more money into the NHS can't be the answer. So all I'm saying is there are big questions for Labour too. I don't think it's slam dunk.
No, I don't think it is either. I think a lot of people are a bit sort of, shall we say, peeved about the fact that the choice is not brilliant. And, they've got either a choice of a Conservative Party that's sort of run out of ideas and a Labour Party that doesn't really have any.
Look, I can think of other words beginning with P that I think people are with this government.
I almost said it, yeah.
Let's go with peeved at this time in the morning. And I think those criticisms are fair, and I think the government, there needs to be some kind of honesty of interaction that the government needs to have with the voters over the next few months. There has to be a general election by January 2025 at the latest. It probably won't run that long. But alongside the government trying to get back on their front foot by making this kind of big set piece speech, I mean, it's been billed by Number 10 itself as a sort of major crossroads. I think if we saw some honesty from the government in saying, look, we didn't quite get everything right, however, we do still think we're broadly on the right path here, and here, and frankly, the alternative is untried, is unknown, and is a bit scary in Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you should add that into the, the horrible future that we're facing if it all goes horribly wrong. But Amy, thank you very much indeed. Amy Fisher, former advisor to Amber Rudd, and of course, former director of communications for the Tory party.